Then we come to the verse James 1:18, which has to do with regeneration. We're discussing what it is to be born again. You cannot be born again until you're in contact with the word gospel of the kingdom. James says the same sort of thing. This is important to me because in the Armstrong movement that we were in many, many years ago, I need to expose this, we were told you couldn't be born again now. You could not be born again until the resurrection. That's absolutely false. And when I discovered that back in 1970-something, we had to leave because that is a big falsehood. So James 1:18, God is the parent again, right? And here is the image of a woman bearing a child. He gave birth to us. It's the same idea. Begetting was what the man does to cause to exist. That's the male part. And what the woman does is to bear. And God is seen here as a mother bearing her children. I love these analogies because you're supposed to understand what it is when a child is born or when a child is begotten or conceived in the womb. You're supposed to understand that. So God gives us his theology based on the laboratory in which we're living. I get it. That's James 1:18. 1 Peter 1:21-25. That connects the born again with the seed, and the seed, of course, is the seed of the parable of the sower. So you can ask your friends, why did only John talk about being born again? Why didn't Matthew, Mark, and Luke use the word born again? They didn't have to use the word born again in those terms, but they had the idea with the seed. You see, the connecting link is the seed. The seed causes the rebirth. Get that in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. John then talks about being born again. It's not difficult when you put it together correctly. What do we got here in 1 John 3:8-9? God's seed remains in him. So John had heard the parable of the sower. We saw that Peter had heard it too. That's terrific. God's seed, God's parenting seed, the immortality seed conferred by God to us, and therefore he cannot continue in sin. It doesn't say he cannot ever sin. We all make mistakes. Even Paul said that. He cannot continue in the sinful way of life because God's seed remains in him, would be the sense of that one. Forget the King James Version here. It's very corrupted. 1 John 5:18, God's seed remains in him and he cannot continue in sin because God's seed is in him. And if you're out there getting drunk every night, the seed of God is not in you. Now, this is not talking about sinless perfection. Only Jesus was absolutely sinless, but we should not be continuing in sinful ways of life. And you notice that the word of truth used by James is the same as the word of the gospel. The word of the kingdom, the word of the gospel, the word of God. You get it. Once you see it, all these synonyms are interconnected.